Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mrs. Williams, and welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to talk about central tendency. But before we get into the lesson, I want to give you the standard and the essential questions for you to write down in your composition notebook. It's very important that you write these two things down because, one, this is what we're going to talk about in the video, and two, this is how you're going to know whether you learned everything that you needed to know. So at the end of the video, go back and look at the standard. If you are able to accomplish the standard, then you learned what you needed to learn. And if you're able to answer the essential questions, then you know that you understood all the material in the video. So I'm going to go ahead and give you those two things now. Today's standard is MG SE 9-12.S.ID.2. I can calculate measures of central tendency of a data set. The essential questions are, number one, what are the different measures of central tendency? Number two, how do you calculate the measures of central tendency? Once again, these two things are how you know if you have understood the materials. If you go back and you find that you really can't answer the questions and you can't accomplish the standard, then you should watch the video again. And after the second time you still don't understand, then you should prepare some questions to ask for when you come to class. This video is going to be our first video on statistics. And statistics is just a way to measure or describe a list of numbers. But instead of saying a list of numbers, we're going to call that information data. Data is simply information, and in math class, the information we normally associate with is numbers. So for example, the grades in your math class is a list of numbers, so that would be data. All the heights of the boys on the basketball team, that's a list of numbers, so that's also data. Or you can say the amount of money each teacher makes at our school. Again, that's a list of numbers, so that is data. But what if we want a way to describe each list of numbers? What if we want a way to measure each list of numbers? That's what, can't talk today. That's what statistics would do. The first statistic we're going to talk about is central tendency. Central tendency is the center of that list of numbers, or the center of that data. It is the number that best represents or best summarizes all of those numbers in that list of data. There are actually three different types of central tendency: mean, median, and mode. You've probably heard of these three things before. Well, they all calculate central tendency, but they are all calculated differently. So let's go ahead and work some examples on how we calculate each one, mean, median, and mode, to give you a quick review. Our first example is to find the mean of the data set. And here is our data set, this list of numbers: 1, 2, 3, 5, 1, 12. So we want to find the mean of these numbers. Well, the formula for mean says that I would just add up these numbers and then divide by the total amount of numbers. So that means we would do 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 5 plus 1 plus 12. All of this divided by the total amount of numbers. Well, I have 6 numbers in my data set, so I would divide by 6. So if I add all of this up, I end up with 24. 24 divided by, remember, this sign and this sign means the same thing. They both mean division. So we end up with 24 divided by 6. 24 divided by 6 is 4. So this is the mean of the data set. 4 is the number that closely describes or summarizes all the other numbers in this data set. So example 2 says find the median of the data sets. When we find the median, there are two different cases we have to look at. We have to look at when we have an odd number of data and when we have an even number of data. So if you count the number of numbers in each list, if you end up with an odd number, then you'll have to use this rule. If you have an even number of data, then you would use this one. So in this data set, we have 5 numbers. 5 is an odd number, so that means we're going to use this rule. Now, the median says that it is the middle number when the numbers are in order from least to greatest. So the first thing we have to do is put our numbers in order from least to greatest. So that means it'll be 3, 3, 4, 6, and 16. So if we look, we see that 4 is the number that's in the middle. We have 2 on this side, 2 on this side. So 4 is in the middle. That would mean 4 is the median. So it's pretty simple when you have an odd number of numbers in your list. It gets a little tricky when you have a data set that has an even amount of numbers. So in this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 is an even number. So that means we have to use this rule. But first, we still have to put the numbers in order from least to greatest. So 0, 2, 3, 5, 8, and 10. When you have an even amount of numbers, there's no number that's directly in the middle. If we chose 3, that means we would have 2 numbers on this side, but 3 numbers on that side. If we chose 5, then there's 3 numbers on this side and 2 on that side. So we need a number that's directly in the middle. So what we do is we take the 2 numbers that are in the middle, and then we add them together and divide by 2. 3 plus 5 is 8. 8 divided by 2 is equal to 4. So that means 4 is the median. And if you see, if we plot 4 up here, 4 would cut this list directly in half. There will be 3 numbers on this side, 3 numbers on this side. So 4 is the median. So now look at example 3, and we're going to find the mode of the data sets. So we have 3 different data sets here, and we're going to find the mode of each one. Remember, the mode is just the number that occurs the most in a data set. So it's the number that appears the most time. So in this data set, we can see that the only number that repeats is 8. So 8 occurs the most times, so 8 would be the mode. In this case, we only have one mode. Let's look at the next one. We have 6, 5, 1, 8, and 3. Well, in this case, none of the numbers repeat. And if we don't have any numbers that occur more than one time, then we can say that the data set has no mode because it doesn't have a number that repeats itself or a number that happens more than one time. Let's look at the third one. Here we have 2 4s and we have 2 8s. So these both occur 2 times, so what's the mode? In fact, both of them are the mode because it's the number or numbers that occur the most. Well, 4 and 8 occur the most in this data set, so 4 and 8 are the mode. In this case, we would say it's bimodal. Bi means 2. And of course, modal means mode. So bimodal means that a data set has 2 modes. So let's go ahead and summarize what we just learned. The mean is calculated by adding up, or the sum of all of the numbers in our data divided by the amount of numbers in the list. The median is the middle number when we arrange the list in order from least to greatest. And the mode is the number that occurs the most in a list of data. Let's do a few more practice problems so that you can see how different mean, median, and mode can be, even though they measure the same thing. So example 4 says that we want to find the 3 measures of central tendency of the data set. Well, what are those 3 measures? That's the mean, median, and mode. So we're going to find all 3 for this list of numbers. Let's start with the mean. So the mean says that if we add up all these numbers and divide by the total amount of numbers, that gives us our mean. So we would simply just add up 15 plus 24 plus 49 plus 8 plus 50 divided by, well, how many numbers are in the list? 5. So divided by 5. When we add all of this up, we get 146 divided by, remember that sign still means divided by, 5. Now this is where you might want to use your calculator. If you put 146 divided by 5, you get 29.2. So 29.2 would be our mean. Next, let's find our median. To find the median, the first thing we always have to do is put our numbers in order from least to greatest, or from smallest to biggest. So that would be 8, 15, 24, 49, and 50. Well, let's count the amount of numbers. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have 5 numbers, and since 5 is an odd number, the only thing we have to do is simply find the middle number. In this case, 24 is the number that's directly in the middle. So you see I have 2 on this side, 2 on that side. So 24 is directly in the middle. So that would mean that 24 is the median. Oh, and I forgot to circle that up here. And the last case would be the mode. So looking at our data set up here, we don't have any numbers that repeat themselves. Every number only happens or occurs one time. So that means our data set or the list of numbers does not have a mode. Our last example is example number 5. And it says, find the 3 measures of central tendency of the data set. Well, the 3 measures again are mean, median, and mode. So they want us to find all 3 of the central tendencies for this one data set. So the first thing we're going to find is the mean. And remember, we find the mean by adding up all the numbers in the data and then dividing by the total amount of numbers. So we would add 3 plus 7 plus 9 plus 4 plus 5 plus 4 plus 6 plus 7 plus 9. This is where your calculator again would come in handy, because oftentimes you're going to deal with a data set or a list of numbers that's pretty long. So you might want to use your calculator for this. And then we're going to divide by the total amount of numbers. In this case, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 numbers. So we would divide by 9. When you add all of this up, you get 54 divided by 9. Remember, this sign here and this sign means the same thing. So 54 divided by 9 is 6. So in this case, 6 is the mean of this data set. So let's find the median now. The median is the middle number, but only when the numbers are arranged in order from least to greatest. So that's the first thing we have to do. So putting them in order, we will end up with 3, 4, 4, 5, 6, 7, 2 sevens, and 9 and 9. So let's see how many numbers we have, because remember, it's different if it's odd or even. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We have 9 numbers, so that means there's only going to be one number in the middle. And if you get a little confused, just always start with your fingers and move in. So here, then go in, go in, go in. I see that 6 is a number that's left in the middle. So 6 would be our median. The last one is the mode. The mode is the number that occurs the most in a data set. And now that we have our numbers in order from greatest or from least to greatest, it makes it very easy to see how many of each number do we have. So I'm going to rewrite that. It's easy to see that I have 2 4s, 2 7s, and 2 9s. So what does that mean? That means I have a data set that has 3 modes. The mode would be 4, 7, and 9. So we have a mode with 3 different numbers. So you see from the practice problems that we can get different numbers for the mean, median, and mode all from the same data set, and that's okay. This is actually my next point. Sometimes it's better to use one central tendency rather than another. Sometimes it's best to use the mean, sometimes it's best to use the mode, sometimes it may be better to use the median, just to get a more accurate answer. So for instance, if you have a data set or a list of numbers where you end up getting a number that repeats often, then it's probably best to use the mode for your central tendency. If you have a data set that has outliers, and outliers are those extreme values, it's those numbers that doesn't seem to quite fit in with the rest of the numbers, and we'll talk about that more in another video. But again, if you have those outliers or those numbers that don't quite fit in your data set, it's probably best to use the median. And if you have a data set or a list of numbers where there aren't any outliers, meaning there are no numbers that seem out of place, then it's best to use the mean. And again, we'll talk about this more in depth in a later video. But just know for now that sometimes one central tendency may be better to use than another. Okay, I quickly just wanted to show you what your notes should look like so far. And you can see that I've written my notes on a sheet of notebook paper simply because it's easier to record, but your notes should be written in your composition notebook. And I've already set up my paper so that it's in Cornell Notes. So I can see if I can get a better view of it. But you see I've already divided my paper up into the Cornell Notes where I have my information on the side and my summary at the bottom. And then the first thing you'll see, I've written the title at the top of the paper. You don't have to write it as fancy as I did, but I want it to be a little creative. I wrote down the standard and I wrote down the 2 essential questions. And below that, I started writing my notes. Now, your notes may look a little bit different from what I have, and that's perfectly fine, but you should have at least this information. I have the definition, I have the 3 central tendencies, and I even wrote the formulas for the mean. If you want, you can also go in and highlight some of the key words that we talked about. And over here on the side, I have some things that I wanted to remember to say. So if you had some questions or some things that you wanted to remember, you can just write that here. And then at the bottom, you should write a summary of everything that you learned on this page. And then you'll see on the second page, I kept going with my examples. I wrote all the examples down, all the definitions down, and I also kept highlighting my words. Now, if you want, you can use different colors too, like I did, just to make it pop or easier to understand, but that choice is up to you. And again, at the bottom, you will summarize all the notes that's on this page, and in the margin over here, you'll write down any notes or anything extra that you researched and you want to remember over here. And here's the last page. I have some more examples. I have our practice problems and some things that I wanted to remember. So I just wanted to show you an example of what your notes should look like by the end of this. Well, that's it for this video. I wanted to keep it kind of short since this is the first instructional video. But before I go, I wanted to give you a quick word of encouragement. And that is, everyone has talents. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it'll live its whole life thinking that it's stupid. Alright, give my video a thumbs up if you learned something. If you have any suggestions on how I can make my videos more interesting or easy to understand, just leave them in the comments below. Or if my quote resonated with you and you have something interesting you want to tell me about the quote, then also leave that in the comments below, or you can just come to class and tell me then. I look forward to seeing you in class, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.